Section 7-1, Part 2. A function is a rule for taking each input value and producing exactly one output value. Let's look at these mappings of input and output. In this specific mapping, -2 corresponds with 3, -1 corresponds to 2, 0 corresponds to 1, and 1 corresponds to 0. This is a function because for each input value, it produces exactly one output value. When trying to determine if a relation is a function, you look at the input values. If the input values do not repeat, then yes, it is a function. Let's look at this mapping. In this mapping, 1 corresponds to -1, and 1 also corresponds to +1. 4 corresponds to 2, and 4 also corresponds to -2. So if we were to write out the ordered pairs from this relation, I would have 1, -1, 1, +1, 4, 2, and 4, -2. You see, if the x's repeat, it is not a function. So here, with the ones repeating, this is not a function. So let's continue looking at an example, looking at Part 2. Using mapping diagrams to identify functions. Which relations are functions? Use a mapping diagram to explain your reasoning. So let's look at A part. Let's draw a mapping, input and output. Remember, your input are your x values, your output are your y values. So I'm doing A part. 0, 1. 0 corresponds to 1. 1 corresponds to 4. Looking at your ordered pairs, 1 corresponds to 4. 2 corresponds to 5. And 3 corresponds to 7. The x's do not repeat. Here we have a relation that is a function because each input value produces exactly one output value. So this would be, yes, this is a function. Which relations are functions? Use a mapping diagram to explain your reasoning. Now let's look at B part. Let's look at the input and output for B part. All right, -2 corresponds to 0. -2 corresponds to 0. Looking at the next ordered pair, -1 corresponds to 0. So it also goes to 0. 0 input also goes to 0 output, and +1 also corresponds to 0 output. So the question is, do the x's repeat? They do not. Therefore, yes, this is a function. So both A and B are functions. Last, let's look at C, input and output, to determine if this relation is a function. So let's look at C, 0, -1. So I have 0, -1. Okay? 0, -1. Looking also at C, 0 also pairs with 3. So we have 0, the same 0, also pairing with +3. Going back to C, 1 corresponds to 2. So I have 1 corresponding to 2. And then also in C, 3 corresponds to 2. So I have 3 corresponding to 2. So the question is, do the x's repeat? Well, 0 corresponded to -1 in this ordered pair, and 0 also corresponded to +3. So yes, the 0 did repeat. So therefore, no, this is not a function. This relation is not a function because the input value 0 produces 2 different output values. 0 produces -1, and it also produces 3. So this C part is not a function.